Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. These are conversations with remarkable people whose passion and ideas contribute to a better world. Today, we're talking about Iowa's natural environment, some of the problems we face with the future of Iowa lands, and the reasons for hope that we can heal a landscape so critical to our well-being. Our guest, Connie Mutel, a science writer and historian, has written 15 books that have earned her respect as an expert on Iowa's natural environment. Let's meet our guest, Connie Mutel. Welcome to the show, Connie. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi Peter. Very nice to be here. Well, my life has been an interesting journey, and I was very much a child of the 50s, a post-war, right after the Second World War, right when we were set to take off into an entirely new technological world. That's when I was born, and I've lived uh, a life where I've been very, very sensitive to environmental change. My dad was a forester. My grandfather was a hobby botanist who loved to go out. He was a Lutheran pastor. He loved to go out on Sundays afternoons after he did his church worship. He did his world worship, and he went out and identified plants in the wilds of Wisconsin. And I just grew up in this environment where my parents loved nature, as many people did in the 50s and 60s. Went on to college. It was pretty obvious that I'd major in biology, went on to graduate school in plant ecology, got married, which brought me to Iowa, where my husband and I have lived ever since. And we live north of Iowa City in a woodland, 18 almost 20 acres of native Oak Hickory Forest. When people often come here to look at the woods, and I show them around and show them the plants. And what I first say is, you're walking into an ecosystem that's 10,000 years old, that came here on the heels of the melting glaciers as they were receding to the north. And and this is a sacred place. And that's the way I raised our kids. We raised our kids. And that's what I've written about. The importance of nature. I'm trained as a scientist. I think as a scientist. So I always talk about the science of what's happening. Why are we having environmental problems now? What are the processes? But my heart is very much in what I write, and writing about and hopefully telling people about this world as a complex, self-perpetuating system that it seems like we being humanity are dead set on re you know perhaps like our current political situation. We want to reshape it in our own way, in the way that we think it should be. It's what people have done forever, but we seem to be doing it in spades. And that's ironically leading to systems that do not nurture and support life the way nature wants to do, the way nature has evolved. Nature has always been a system that perpetuated life, that created life, that evolved new life, that a place where everything was interrelated and interacting for the benefit of all the species and all the organisms that live there, including humans.
You know, it's an interesting point you raise as a scientist. And I share those biases that science is sort of a key to understanding nature. But there's been sort of a divergence where it becomes so profound and permeated so much of our media and our day-to-day life that there's an emotional side to this. There's where you find your passion, often people's entry into looking at our natural landscape is emotional, where they see landfills, they see pollution, they see plastic bottles, and though they may not have a scientific background, they feel impacted because something seems wrong.
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
so we have a large audience of people in the world that sense that wrong, but maybe don't have a scientific basis for understanding. Is that a sign that things are getting out of control, or is it just a way for people that are maybe not science-based to begin to understand these processes and how they affect them?
Yeah, I would say rather the latter. It's very strange to me now how people in this country don't have respect for science, don't have respect for the system of how to look at the world, and to somehow define, this is a very tricky word to use, but to somehow define what is true, what's real. Um, and that's what science is about, but it uses this system of research and checks and balances and peer review and multiple repetitions to get the data. This well-established system to look at what we're seeing, what I'm looking out my window now at our beautiful Oak Hickory woods. What am I seeing? Well, I'm seeing things that I love, but I'm also seeing things that are interacting, trees that are interacting through microfungi into the soils and through uh, mechanisms we knew nothing about 20 years ago. Couldn't have even imagined that trees, for example, would secrete pheromones, these chemical hormones that interact with other trees. So there's science, but I think very, 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 very strongly that I always think about how humans evolved in nature. And whatever we do to nature, however much disdain we might have for the natural world, we are linked irrevocably to natural systems. And somehow in our cells, I would say in our genetic memory, that connection is real and it's true. And if you can get people out into natural systems, they feel it. And
All right, let's take a break right
that
here because
feeling.
that's what I
Okay.
want to really start the next segment with, to talk
Okay.
about those feelings and connecting them to a sense of reality and hope for the future. See you all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
This is how we do at MC22. 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 Providing you entertainment when you're bored out of your mind on our channel or the Plus and online anytime.
From the Quad Squad to the Spirit Lakes team, we bring your local action straight to your screen.
This is how we do at MC22.
There is a road laid out for me.
First night here, but Amy seems cool.
Leading down to the river. I am blind, but I need not see.
What do you think?
I know this road is there for me. If I'm really free, take me down to the river and walk.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with Connie Mutel, and we were talking about sort of the interconnectedness of things. And some of that's historical and some of that's sort of prescient. It's in the moment. But there's some deep historical roots in Iowa that Connie's an expert in, and maybe you can share some of that and tell us a little bit of how Iowa is evolving and where we sit in that evolution.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we sit here as people who almost exactly 200 years ago were from a Euro-American descent, most of us, and many of us. And we came into this state that, as we know, was occupied, and we displaced the people that had been living here, which is a tragedy in itself. But what I want to talk more about is what those people had lived with for the last 10,000 years, as the forests came back and gradually ceded to the tallgrass prairie, which was probably the most diverse, ecologically diverse ecosystem in North America. Incredible diversity of plants, 1,000 species of vascular plants in the native prairies. And uh, masses of birds flying over, passenger pigeons that would fly overhead for days at a time and nest and roost and nest in colonies that were many square miles large, and diversities of insects. It was a place that hummed and whirled, and all the sounds of the birds and the insects and the moving animals and the little animals rustling through the prairies. What this ecosystem was in reality was a system where all of those interconnections shaped the environment into a system that was a place where all species, or nearly all of the species, could survive. It was shaped for the good, for the nurturing of all of those species. And this is what diversity does. In ecology, you say that diversity is much more sustainable than simplicity, what we have now with our corn and beans ecosystems and on croplands. But this incredibly diverse ecosystem shaped the way the water flowed over the land. The prairie soils were 16 inches average deep and were 50% air, so big air pockets, and those air pockets captured and slowed water so that the water was cleansed as it flowed over the landscape. And by the time it got down to the little swale at the bottom of the hill, it was clean and it was moving slowly so the stream beds didn't erode. That water, it's in itself, was a home for a habitat for many water-loving species, many of which we don't see now at this time, and ecosystems that are based on submergence in water.
Let me interrupt you for a second because
Yeah.
there's an interesting paradox here that we have to deal with sometimes as humans, isn't it? It's wonderful to say that that environment was so healthy that it could support this wonderful diversity of species.
Hmm.
But there's one species, more of an opportunistic one, called humans, that it didn't really accommodate well. Our needs were somewhat destructive. So there's a different kind of centrism. You know, there's one side where we look at the environment as health, and then there's the other side where humans actually mine some of these ecosystems, and that's probably not going to change, but maybe some things about it could, because there were humans here before, but the Native Americans were much more in balance with the natural ecosystem, and their
Right.
population density was low enough that it could support them.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I think we should talk about that. Um, But I just want to make sure that the listeners understand a little bit more about these many interconnections. Um, my most recent book was a book that looked at our soils, our water, our the climate, and the biodiversity in Iowa, and looked at how all of these are interconnected. They're all like a set of circles that weave together, with each one affecting the other one. And that's what made Iowa sustainable. So, for example, I just talked about how water um, was based on soils. Soils were based on were formed over 10,000 years by these deep roots of the prairie plants. And in turn, the deep soils gave homes to new prairie plants that were evolving. Um, everything affected everything else, and as uh, species as a whole were able to survive. Not all of the individuals, but the species were able to survive. And then in the following last 200 years, which we're going to talk about next, though that system was those circles, those interconnections that allowed life, started to be severed. So,
Well, we'll take a short break on that
yes.
since let's use
Okay.
severance as a point of
Okay.
order here as
Sounds
well.
good.
Um, and then I do want to remind people that if they Google search your name and look for books, their local libraries will have many of your books. I was wonderfully surprised to find your books in my local library and read them over the holiday period. They're fascinating reads. They're fun. Make sure you take a look at Connie's stuff out there because you'll enjoy reading it long after the show is done. And we'll see you all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
Local programming at your fingertips. Access to MC22 is easier than ever before and available to all Mediacom subscribers. Go to mc22.net, log into your Mediacom account, click Watch MC22, and then browse our catalog of local programming available for you. Anywhere, anytime. mc22.net/watch.
Dear future, we haven't met yet. We don't know what you look like. But at MediaCom, we think about it every day. And we'll say this: if we keep working as hard as we have the past 3 decades, if we keep adding miles of fiber, if we keep advancing our technology, if we keep raising the bar and raising each other up, we won't just be ready for you, we'll be leading the way. Sincerely, MediaCom.
Hello, welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking about Iowa's natural environment with scientist and author Connie Mutel. Now, we really can see how Iowa has been this diverse organism building and species diversity building landscape, but we also know that humans have altered it for the sake of agriculture, and that it may be what we call a necessary evil, but it doesn't have to be as destructive. What are some of the things that we can do to not only understand what's happening with agriculture, but how to balance our needs with some real needs of this sort of biodiversity potential that Iowa has?
Right. Well, I've, as a self-studied historian, I do like to look at this in historical perspective and remember that the first settlers here, within a couple years, were already sending meat and crops down to St. Louis on flatboats, and it's almost as if Iowa was destined, because of its great richness, to be an export state and to be, as farmers like to say today, feeding the world, which is something that none of us can do, but we like to think about that here in Iowa. The problem was that as far as agriculture got established here, many of the connections that had held the ecosystems together started to be broken. And what we could do with modern agriculture is the product of many years of people applying new technologies, of government policies that favor big agriculture and productivity, of pushing productivity and profit, oftentimes, instead of sustainability. But that it doesn't have to be that way. I think that if we reinserted nature into agriculture, we can get some of that sustainability back on the land. For example, the prairies that built our soils, that created a quarter of the world's richest topsoil here in Iowa, have these very, very deep roots that solve many problems at one time. They hold water, they make the soil, add organic matter to the soil, they help control climate change, they provide habitat for numerous microorganisms, and many farmers now are integrating samples of that, associations of prairie species, into buffer strips and even planting them as rows of prairies within the fields itself, and those rows of prairie plants provide the ecosystem services that the natural prairie originally did. Another thing to think about is how our technology has allowed us to remove cattle and put them into confinement, or livestock into confinement buildings that really produce more manure than we can handle on our fields. And there's big problems with pollution of water from the manure and from the pesticides and the herbicides and the fertilizers that we put on the soils. But if we were able to integrate get some of those animals back out into the fields once again, they could mimic the patterns that bison did that many, a couple centuries ago. We can look for ways to reintegrate the natural world into our agriculture, and that's going to be better for agriculture and for nature itself. They can both be nurturing each other. I think that's what we need to aim for.
That's a wonderful ideal. Now, what is the reception like? I mean, I don't want to talk politics, but I mean, do we see a new generation of farmers really gravitating towards this to the point where it's going to make a significant impact?
Well, I think the first part of your sentence was true. Yes, there's a new generation of farmers that are doing that. Or I wouldn't even say a new generation. I think farmers have always aimed, many of our farmers have always aimed at sustainability and caring for their land in a very careful way. Um, but farmers who do not want to uh, do just corn and beans, those are there. But are they always aiming to reintegrate nature? I can't answer. I can't answer that. I don't know the statistics on the number of farmers that are doing this. I'm sorry. I just know that there is a real movement. There are people in Iowa that care much for the land, care much about farming, using it well, and care for what the land can give to us too, the organic foods and the fresh vegetables and the like, and whatever we can do as consumers to promote those people, to help those people get established. Nyman Ranch meats, for example, they cost a little bit more, but they taste better and they do so much more for nature than confinement animals do.
Yeah, and I do want to add that
Yeah.
farmers aren't an adversary of the environment. What we're looking at is we're just learning the effects. We're learning what we've done. And farmers are just as interested in preserving the integrity of their lands for the future and sustainable harvest as anybody else, because that's a resource that they need. But we're acting on information that's relatively new. Hence the importance of a lot of your books, that they give people an understanding of these relationships and the historical sort of relationship, and also ways in which people can refocus. So let's take a short break before we start, because we're going to move on. And when we come back, I'd like you to share some final comments, insights, and inspiration for our viewers.
Okay.
We'll see you all after the break.
Mediacom Mobile. You'll love the service and the savings. Unbeatable nationwide coverage. Unlimited data. Unbelievably affordable. Switch and save 30% or more over the top 3 mobile providers. Get unlimited mobile for just $40 per line per month. Bam! No hidden fees, no contracts. Switching is cake. Keep your phone, keep your number, everything you love, except the big bill. Mediacom Mobile. Call or shop online.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
"30 years ago, the internet was barely a thing. But the beginning of everything. At Mediacom, we've been here. Every single step, stride, and slide along the way. And for as much as the internet has changed, we've changed. The speed and size of our network, the performance of our technology, the scale and power of our security. Investing in the growth of our communities, and keeping you ready for what's next. See you there.
Welcome back. Today on Surviving Bad, we talked about Iowa's natural environment, the problems we face with the future of Iowa lands, and the reasons for hope that we can heal a landscape so critical to our well-being. Let's see what insights and inspiration Connie has to share. Connie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, what I'd like to reinforce is the idea that each of us can make a difference in leading to a better future. And we can think about the circularity of nature. everything that we do to nature, whether it harms nature or helps nature, is going to lead us to a different future. So if we can look at the natural world and try to get the prairie plants back on the soil, use techniques to get the water cleaner so it can be a better habitat, address climate change, all of those things will in turn lead to a healthier world where native biodiversity flourishes more, and where we have a better world, but all species have a better world. But I'd also like to stress the idea that we need to talk to each other. Our world is so divided now. And I think that people, even if they don't acknowledge this, we all have a fear and sometimes depression, anxiety about where our natural environment is going because we're so connected to nature. And we need to share our feelings. We need to speak the truth kindly and to encourage other people, tell our personal stories. That often is, those are more important and more better received. Talk about local efforts, local ways that people can address climate change, water pollution, and the like. And I think that those will create a positive vision in other people's minds, and the positive vision will lead to hope. Hope leads to action, and action will lead to a better world for us and for all of nature.
Well, I thank you so very much for sharing that. And I hope to have you on a future episode so we can drill into some more detail on some of the ideas you shared today. But this should be a wonderful way for people to get to know you and your books. And I encourage people to find them and read them. Thank you all for joining us today. And thank you all for watching. Watch MediaCom MC22 and MC22.net for all of our episodes of Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration with some of America's most remarkable people. On MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.